Yo guys, F123 is now here, and one of the first areas that I like to spend time tinkering with is the car setups. And with Bahrain being the first track on the F1 calendar, I'm going to go ahead and start right there. So just as we did last year, here is our optimal F123 Bahrain car setup. This has been designed to be competitive during races, and it's worth noting that this is not a time trial setup. I mean, it will still be fast, but there can be some adjustments made if you do want to use it for time trials. Instead, this setup's designed for races and longer distance races as well, and it will give you a competitive car during a race along with good tyre wear. Now before I do jump into the setup itself, I just want to say that I'm going to be releasing daily F123 car setup videos, so subscribe if you want to be notified when a new video drops, and also hit that like button if you're enjoying F123 so far. So starting with the aero setup for our Bahrain car setup, I've opted for a front wing aero of 36 and a rear wing aero setup of 35. Now this approach is relatively high downforce, and despite Bahrain being home to a few long straights, you will be able to put in the fastest lap times with a higher downforce setup. This is due to almost the entire track from turn 1 through to the second to last corner requiring a pretty high downforce setup. I've opted for a slightly higher front wing aero setup than the rear just to give a little extra turning, although both front and rear wings remain extremely similar, and this provides good balance between the front and rear of the car. Now, F123 has really gone a long way to improve the feel of driving a Formula 1 car without traction control. It's now much easier to apply the throttle without spinning your rear wheels in this year's game. Despite this, I've still opted for a low on-throttle diff setup. Bahrain has a few heavy traction zones where you'll be accelerating hard from low speed, and it's a track which is notoriously rear limited due to these traction zones. So opting for a low on-throttle diff just ensures that throughout a longer race where tyres are wearing, it's still easy to find traction. I've set up the transmission at 56% for on throttle and 54% off throttle, and this is very similar to our approach in F122. The suspension geometry also follows suit from our F122 setup, with this setup's camber and toe almost being identical to last year's game. Go all the way right on the camber for both front and rear, and then reduce the front toe all the way and set the rear toe at 0.12. This approach will give you the best speed throughout a lap without too much penalty to tyre wear. The suspension setup is one area of car setups that's rather different in this year's game. There are now much more options to choose from when configuring the suspension, the anti-roll bar and ride height. There are 41 options for both front and rear suspension, 21 for the anti-roll bars and 20 for the ride height. For this F123 Bahrain car setup, I've softened everything down from the default setup. Go with 15 on the front suspension and 10 on the rear, and then opt for 9 on the front anti-roll bars and just 1 on the rear. Finally, set the ride height almost slap bang in the middle at 37 in the front and 40 in the rear. A softer suspension is beneficial around Bahrain in F123, but it'll be interesting to see if this trend continues for other tracks in this year's game. Now the way brake bias setups has also changed in F123, meaning you won't be able to run 50% brake bias anymore. Instead, I've opted for a brake bias of 57%. This is to really eliminate any rear locking which can happen during a race if you brake a little too hard or a little too late. It is hard for you to lock your front wheels in this year's game, so you can get away with a brake bias set to 57%, but this is a little bit on the high side. Then keep the brake pressure at 100% for the best braking efficiency. Finally, the tyre setup is on the low side for Bahrain. I've lowered the front pressures to 22.9 psi on the front right and 22.6 on the front left. Now the reason that the left pressure is lower than the right is that the tyre that wears the fastest throughout a race is the left front, so this is just designed to protect it a little bit. And then for the rear tyre pressures, I've gone with 20.2 psi on both right and left rear tyres. You can run the tyres hotter in F123 compared to last year's game, with the optimal temperature sitting around 100 degrees. And that rounds out our first F123 car setup. I'm really enjoying my time with F123 so far, and the cars are certainly easier to drive without any assist enabled compared to last year. This may lead to some more aggressive car setups at future tracks. However, this setup's designed to give you the most balanced and stable car, which is still very competitive during a full race distance. Let me know in the comments how you're finding F123 and whether you think it's more enjoyable to drive than last year's game. I'll also be releasing F123 car setups every day moving forward, along with tips and tricks videos. So if you want to be notified when a new car setup's available, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. But for now guys, enjoy this F123 Bahrain car setup and I will see you on track.